Welcome back to the Bricks. It is great to be back on this episode with you all. We have had some technical and microphone difficulties. We've had some schedule lapses. We've had a whole bunch of stuff happen. We do have some stuff in the oven for you guys cooking up. The preheating's almost done on it. We're about to the bake time, but it's coming for you all. So we're excited to give you guys some good stuff going forward. But we're going to jump right into an episode today, and we have sports this week. We've had sports, we've had the MLS, we've had golf, we've had NASCAR, but we have legit a whole bunch of sports coming together this week, these last couple of weeks of July. So the big one that's been in the forefront of everything here, Nick, is the NFL. So they put out a plan on Saturday that rookies are reporting on Tuesday, July 21st. Quarterbacks and players off injury are coming back Thursday, July 23rd. All other players coming back Tuesday, July 28th. And we have seen a lot of pushback on this from players, notably Russell Wilson, who has a pregnant wife who he's worried about what's going to happen, what's things going to look like, what's the protocol that players are going to be held to and teams are going to be held to. I just want to know, what do you think about the safety measures, and what do you think about the players reaching out on social media and all that kind of stuff going on right now in the NFL?
I mean, the safety measures are non-existent. That's the whole thing, right? So they said the players can come back. They listed like the return to OTAs and then eventually training camp and then eventually practice. But they haven't actually said what they're going to do. And the reason the players like Russell Wilson have issues with, like you said, his wife's pregnant. Obviously, that's something that you need to think about more than maybe just another player who has a different situation. But the players want to be tested every day, and the NFL does not want to do that from a financial standpoint. Of course, they're going to find science and they're going to find leaders that are going to back them up on that. But the players want to be tested every day. They want to be physically ready, meaning they don't want to have to get right into preseason games that don't mean anything. They don't want to have to play stupid games. And I think that's a good place to start as far as I'm concerned. Get rid of the preseason games. We don't need to play 2. We don't need to play 4. Because here's what I think is going to happen, and I'll lean into what I think I'm going to say later here, Justin. I think we're going to start to play these sports, but I don't think we're going to continue to. And so I don't think it's worth the NFL wasting their time. But you know what? Shout out to the NFL stars like Patty Mahomes and Russell Wilson and those guys yesterday. Understanding we have a voice. They listen to us when we talk. And it's one thing when the Players Union releases a statement. It's another thing when the NFL MVP, Super Bowl champion quarterback, and then Russell Wilson, steady as they come behind center, release a statement on Twitter and just call out the NFL and say, your move. And I think that's the best thing they can do right now is leverage the power that they have to make sure that they play. They don't want to not play. That's not the issue. They just refuse to play in a way that's not safe.
I think they are where a lot of us are at now, and have been for a couple of weeks. They're to the point where they want to do these things. Like, they want to play. We want to go back to work. We want things to go off without a hitch in the fall. But also, we have to take into account that people's safety is still at the forefront, needs to be at the forefront of this thing. We all want life to be normal in the fall. We don't want anything to change. We want to do our normal fall thing. But the hand that we have had dealt to us right now doesn't afford that. And so you can't tell me the NFL doesn't have money to test these guys. You can't tell me that. They have so much money, it's ridiculous. And you can't tell me that they don't have the means or the staffing or anything like that to do things the right way. You know what I mean? Like, they have the stuff to do it the right way. So, but do it the right way. We all want football. We all know college football is in jeopardy, and we've dived into that on this show. We know these things, but we want football to happen. And if we want to see the best players in the world, then we need to do things the right way. Because personally, I think star players will start to opt out if they feel like they're at risk or their family members are at risk, and I can't blame them for that. You know what I mean? Like, I can't blame them. It's their paycheck. I get some of you are going to say they make millions of dollars to play a game. I get that, and you guys are going to work and all that, but it's also their choice and their body's on the line. And so if that's what they want to do, I think that's what they're going to do, and we're going to see that if the NFL doesn't take the necessary steps to keep them safe.
I mean, absolutely. It's a business, right? It's a business on both sides. But the NFL has to understand that from a business standpoint, you're going to have to spend the money to do the testing. or it's not going to be safe enough. It's really that simple. And you know what? Kudos to the star players. And I think they should say, I'm not playing. And I don't think that should be an issue culturally. That shouldn't be an issue with the fans. I mean, at a certain point, you should be able to say, this is my body I'm putting on the line, like you said. This is my job. Yes, I make millions of dollars to throw a football, catch a football, block for a person. But at the end of the day, it's still your livelihood. It's still your family. And it's still your daily job. So you know what? Kudos to the NFL players, and I think they should keep challenging the NFL until they give them what they need.
Absolutely, and so that's a sport that is getting ready to start back up. As we're recording this, it's starting back up this week, and so we'll see that stuff. And it's exciting to get sports back on TV, but we also want them to do it correctly. So, a couple sports that are really close to starting. Baseball is starting actual games this week. MLS has been in session for a couple weeks now. NHL is starting August 1st. NBA is starting July 31st. But the three sports that are kind of set themselves up to not make it, Major League Baseball, because they're traveling, that's a big one. But the MLS tournament has been back in full gear, I'll say, and they're in the third portion of the group stage. They've already had two teams drop out, Dallas and Nashville. So, Nick, first off, I've watched the quality of MLS compared to the Premier League. You know this. I texted you about it. It's rough. It's not pretty soccer. As a guy who doesn't watch a lot of soccer to begin with, if I can tell it's not pretty soccer, then you know it's not good soccer. But what do you think the end's gonna look like here for them moving forward?
I mean, I think they've probably done the best they can. I mean, like you said, you had Nashville and you had Dallas drop out at the beginning of the tournament before it started because they had players test positive and they honestly couldn't field a team and follow the protocol. I mean, what you're seeing is correct. Poor soccer, and that's what you were going to see regardless. And it's a different argument. Yes, the Premier League, and yes, Bundesliga, and across the world, soccer is played better professionally than in America, and we're working on it. We're trying to improve that, but you were going to get poor level of soccer because of the lack of preparation. You got guys like Nick Hagland, and we talked to several months ago, who's working out on his own in his own apartment, with his family in the background, with free weights and water jugs and whatever he can get his hands on, and then expected in a few weeks turnaround to be ready to go to play 2 hours plus of just straight cardio. I mean, that's just not going to work for anybody. And you saw that even with the old hometown FC Cincinnati 4-0 absolute annihilation against Columbus Crew last week. But I think what the MLS has done well is they've stuck to their guns. So they had two teams who had to drop. They didn't stop. They kept going. They continue to follow protocol. They're continuing to test on a regular basis. They're continuing to actually have a bubble, which I think that's worth having a conversation about as well. And I think you're seeing, what I was fearful of. You see, even going back to Nick Hagland, seen several times on his personal Instagram, just talking about how much he misses his young daughter and his wife, how much they're FaceTiming each other. And honestly speaking, to have a bubble and for it to actually follow safety protocols, that doesn't include family. And so I think that's the issue I have is, if we're going to do this, what's the cost, right? What's the line we're willing to cross from a business standpoint, from a fan standpoint, from a cultural standpoint of, you need to entertain me at all costs. And I think the MLS is trying to strike that balance with the tournament. But, at the end of the day, it's not beautiful sports, but it is sports. And I think they at least are sticking to their guns. So I think the MLS is doing the best they can, but I think eventually you're going to see it fizzle out as far as players continue to test positive, teams continue to be hesitant, and then other players saying, you know what, it's not worth the risk anymore for me and my family.
Well, and it makes me wonder because, we'll jump into this a little later too, but your secondary sports in the United States, such as your MLS, such as your golf, your NASCAR, those secondary sports that were the only things on TV, right? How much is the ratings and all that stuff, if we start getting more positive tests as we get farther into the tournament, how much is people aren't even watching? So what's the point of keeping this thing going? You know what I mean? How much of that is going to play into that? I don't know. I don't know if it will matter, because players want to go out and compete and play. But you got to think for owners and for people in the MLS, that's got to be something that's got to be brought up where people aren't watching. Why are we risking even putting this product out on the field? You know what I mean? So the next big one is Major League Baseball. So they're back Thursday, the 23rd. I said the 24th because our Red Legs play that day, but they're back the 23rd. And the question that's got to be had here is, I think it was Buster Olney or somebody with ESPN said there's a 5% chance that the season will end with a World Series champion. You know what I mean? So there's a 5% chance. So when you have a guy who's as intertwined into baseball as the seams, you know what I mean, is picking a World Series champion even worth doing at this point?
I don't think it is, Justin. And it's fun to sit here and talk about the Dodgers lineup or even the Reds pitching staff, or go down the list of young talent on some squads this year. But I mean, at the end of the day, will they play 60 games? I don't think they play even 60 games. I mean, like you said earlier, like you mentioned, they're traveling. Everything that they've said compared to the science that I've seen and understand and what other leagues are doing doesn't make any sense. Why I understand the idea of making the schedule shorter, absolutely, of making the leagues shorter and doing NL Central, AL Central, doing those crosstown rival things, but it doesn't work that way. Like, unless we're playing in Cincinnati and Cleveland, and that's it. Unless 12 teams are only playing, or 8 teams are only playing in 2 cities, then it doesn't make any sense. And I don't know at what point those kind of conversations broke down. I know there were conversations earlier about maybe we go play where we play spring training and we only play there. And I'm assuming because those places are now hotspots that's off the table, and that makes sense. But I don't know why we think that we can just play baseball and we can take the supposed bubble and move it. Because if you move the bubble, then that's not a bubble. If you add people into the bubble, that's not the bubble. And that's something the PGA experienced the first couple of weeks. They called it a bubble. They said it was a bubble. Every time they were asked, it was a bubble, but people were going in and out. That's not a bubble. And so I want there to be baseball, and I want there to be Reds baseball, because I think they could be pretty daggone good. But I just don't even think it's worth discussing playoffs or World Series, because I don't think we're going to get there.
Yeah, I mean, at every corner, I want to keep getting excited about the Reds. I turn them on Twitter, watch a couple innings, and watch the filth that Sonny Gray and Luis Castillo and Trevor Bauer are throwing, and get excited, or see what Castellanos is doing in Great American. It's like, man, this is exciting stuff. But then it's like, well, are we going to get to watch it for a week, and then it's not going to happen? So it's just like, I guess it might be a little pessimistic, but I think it's realistic too. And I think that's where we're at with a bunch of stuff, is that instead of getting excited, I have set myself up to not be let down. And I think that's what we're doing. That's what's going to end up happening with Major League Baseball. I would rather be surprised that it happened than surprised that it didn't happen. You know what I mean? Just set myself up there. And that's what I think a lot of people are doing just in general with stuff, is that. So I think the MLB is rendering that the same thing. So we talked about it. The Reds, we'll sprinkle a little Reds talk in. The past couple of years, they've been doomed by bad starts, Nick. 60-game season, you can't start bad if you're going to be a good team. Pick to win the NL Central by a lot of people. You can't start bad. Do the Reds start bad, Nick?
So we've got the Detroit Tigers, Chicago Cubs, Detroit Tigers. So if we can't win both Detroit series, then go ahead and throw it out the window, cancel the season. We're not going to the playoffs. If we compete with the Cubs, then I think we've got a shot. So I'll say off the bat, from a schedule standpoint, we should be in the 6-4, 7-3 neighborhood off the bat. A sixth of the way into the season, which is crazy to say. But I don't know, man. I think that it's hard to start a season later, continue to hear the hype about yourself, continue to feel like this is supposed to be the year for the Reds. And I mean, it's different, right? It's different from the social media standpoint. The Reds account, we've been using hashtag Take the Central this entire time. Like, we're not kidding ourselves here. We think we have the talent. We probably have the talent and the hitting. We definitely have the pitching staff. But you got to prove it to me, right? And like you said, I'm already planning to be let down by the MLB in general. But I hate to say it, but I think I'm going to be let down by the Reds as well. And I think they're going to start slow because I just think that's what the Cincinnati Reds do.
Yeah, when you have like Tucker Barnhart walking around with a "we're going to win the whole thing" shirt on, and then you have, I was watching MLB Tonight the other day, and they're literally comparing the pitching staff to the 1990 World Series team, wire to wire team. It's like we haven't even played a game, and we're comparing our pitching staff to a team that was probably one of the best in Reds history, like especially pitching staff wise. It's like we need to slow down here. We're a long way. We've watched the Redlegs for too long to think they're just going to go out there and just take over the whole entire baseball world, because I haven't seen it in my life. I know you haven't, and it's been since 1990 that anything like that's happened for the Reds. So that's.
But I think, Justin, from a different standpoint, like I'll argue with myself here, it's a 60-game season. So if the Reds get hot, the Reds are going to go to the playoffs and they might do some damage, and get to the series because it's a 60-game season. I think a team like the Reds could benefit from that. We talked about that a few weeks ago with Matt Wilks, like with the pitching staff like that, if the bats get hot, we're going to have fresh arms in the playoffs. I mean, everybody will to a certain extent. And so I understand that. But you talk about having 3 or 4, guys who could really be an ace on certain teams. If I only have to run out 3 or 4 starting pitchers in the playoffs because of sheer inning count, then that's advantage Cincinnati Reds. And so I think if the bats are there, they could start feeling themselves and really play the way that they think they can. But I just have to think if they start slow, then it may not come out, publicly, but you're going to start hearing in the clubhouse, guys that are like, we're just what we've always been, and we're not really taking that step forward after all.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, no doubt. And I think the fact that it's a shortened season brings a lot of teams who had no shot back into the fold, because you only got to be good for 60 games. And good teams could be bad for 60 games. The team that won the World Series last year, the Nationals, were terrible until the All-Star break. So it's such a crapshoot of what's going to happen. It's crazy. So my guy, Tiger Woods, was back on the course this weekend, and we'll just leave it at that. There was nothing else really special about it except that he was back on a golf course, and on Sunday he wore red because nothing else in his game really warranted anything that exciting. So here's where we're at. Tiger's old, right? I think he's 44. And how long has he carried the game of golf? And he's taken it to places where people never thought it would go. And I'll say I don't think it'll ever be there again when he's gone for good or playing, one tournament or just the Masters or whatever. So is Tiger playing well not good for golf, Nick? If you can explain that, and then tell me what you think. If him not playing well, or him playing well, is not good for golf.
Well, I want to start with, I think, our perception of the game of golf. I think something that I was very unaware of when I came into discovering the game of golf and discovering the PGA and the way that the players make money and how the format works. The game did not exist that way until Tiger Woods broke onto the scene. Guys did not make millions of dollars a week. Guys did not make $100,000 to barely make the cut and finish tied 35th. And so I think to start there, you got to say Tiger's good for the game, period. Tiger is always going to be good for the game because guys are making money and they have brand deals and they have sponsorships and everything. But to answer your question, yes, if Tiger's not playing well, it's not good for golf. And I think there was this theory that when Tiger was out of the game and Tiger was rehabbing and getting his personal life back on track, that it was like, we're just waiting for Tiger. We're just waiting for Tiger. We're just waiting for Tiger. And so there was almost like this huge buildup. And then Tiger came back, did okay, won a few golf tournaments, and then won the Masters. And it was like, oh, Tiger's back. Tiger's amazing. And at the end of the day, Tiger is officially a horse for the course. Tiger is going to play well at about 3 tournaments a year. He's going to play about 6 or 7 a year. He's going to play a little bit more because of the way the schedule's worked out with the restart probably in the next 18 months with 7 majors and 9 months or whatever way it figures out there. But he's a horse for the course now. He's going to be a guy that is picked to win at Augusta, who's picked to win at Torrey, places like that, because that's what he's going to be. He's not going to show up to tournaments he doesn't think he can compete in. And he's not going to show up in tournaments to win FedEx Cup points. He doesn't care. He doesn't want to win the FedEx Cup. I mean, he probably wouldn't say that, but he's literally not going to play in enough golf tournaments to do that. So he's obviously saying that. I mean, if you watched his interview yesterday, they asked him, how was it to be out there this week? Well, he said, I was grateful to make the cut. Shouldn't have made the cut, which he shouldn't have. I mean, guys like
Thanks.
Bryson.
Yeah, thanks, Bryson, for getting a 10.
Bryson's 10, which I want to talk about for sure. But Tiger was glad to make the cut, glad to do a few things. I mean, he comes out, he birdies number one. I know you were fired up from the get-go. The text before I even knew Tiger was off that he birdied one. Here we go. And then he kind of battled day one, did the thing where he played conservatively. He really felt like I would say his historical strategy. I'm going to play even a few under the first 2 days. People are going to come back to me after the cut. Then I'll turn it up on Saturday and Sunday. And it just didn't happen. I mean, you saw Friday briefly. He comes out, he birdies number one. He's tied 2 for the tournament. And then you never saw him again. Well, you did see him again because when Tiger plays, he's in a featured group. And that's a different discussion. That's good for golf. Other guys should be in featured groups, but Tiger should always be in a featured group. That's good for golf. But, I mean, he looked bad, and he looked old, and he was doing some of the back winces. He didn't look like he was enjoying himself. And I just don't get it. I want Tiger to play well because it's good for the game. I'm not a huge Tiger fan. You know that, Justin. But I do appreciate that he appears to have gotten his personal life back on track. And so it makes me more willing to hope that his golf swing comes back. But I think now more than ever, Tiger is needed for the game of golf because other sports are coming back. So Tiger needs to play well. If he's going to play, he needs to play well because more people watch. And that's just a fact. When Tiger is on the course, people watch. And so I think that's the only reason he might be bad for the game when he's not playing well, is simply because, like you said, with the NHL, with the MLS, these other sports are coming back. If the NFL and college football and the MLB are playing, then there's not going to be a lot of people watching.
I compare Tiger to Batman a little bit, right? Like in his early days, people were like, this dude's just winning everything. This isn't fun. He's just dominating. This isn't fun. Batman dominating, taking away all criminals. This isn't fun kind of thing. He goes away, right? He has this stuff happen in his life. He goes away for about he was still playing, but he went away for about a 5 to 7 year period where he wasn't really worth anything, even when he played. And then people put the bat signal up, right? They put the Tiger signal up, and they're like, we need you back. We're in bad shape. We need you to come back. And he came back and carried the game of golf on his shoulders for another couple years. And then now, you're right, he's in a place where he's not going to compete every weekend. He's not going to do those things. He's more of an ambassador for golf now than he is anything. Maybe he'll win 1 or 2 more majors at Augusta, or if they play at Pebble, or some of those things, some of those places where he's good at. He might rack up a couple, but his big thing now is just when he's there, people are paying attention to golf, and that's what golf needs. And so that's where we're at with Tiger. His days of dominating the tour is over. For a guy who loves Tiger, I have to say that it's over. There's too many young guys who are really good and who aren't afraid of him anymore because they have nice guy Tiger and Tiger that's their, President's Cup captain and all this kind of thing where they know him on a personal level. So they're like, I'm not afraid of that guy anymore. Like, what's to be afraid of? He's a good old guy who, cuts up with me on the course, that kind of thing. So there's nothing to really be afraid of anymore. So, and like you said, I think PGA, I said it earlier, PGA ratings are doomed to go back down to where normal level is when all these mainstream sports come back. Just because, a guy like me, I'll turn golf on, I'll watch it if Tiger's involved or if Jordan Spieth's involved on a Saturday or a Sunday. But if it's not, I can just pull up my phone and follow it on my phone, and I have to watch every hole. And so that's what I think. That's where I think a lot of fans are at with that. So, Nick, we are getting back into our routine here. We've fallen off the wagon a little bit with it, but we're jumping back on. So, who do you have as your GOAT of the week, your greatest of all time of this week, Nick?
I think it's got to be the Golden Bear. I think Jack Nicklaus. I mean, what a week he had. I think he flexed big time on the best in golf. So we have what's happened for the first time in, I believe, since the 1958, 1978, something like that, where the PGA played 2 events back-to-back in the same location. So they played the Workday Charity Open last week, which was a new event. Basically, COVID made it happen. And then they played, of course, the Memorial at Muirfield. Same spot 2 weeks in a row, but made the course very, very different. So last week, the rough was short. The greens were slow. You could land a ball on the green. You could do whatever you want. The scores were super low. This week, they let the greens literally die. They let the rough go as hard as they wanted to. And it was because they were going to rip it up afterwards. And I thought that was hilarious, And Jack made a few references before the week of the Memorial this week where he said, basically, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to let the course get as terrible as it can be, as hard as it possibly can play. We're going to put the pins in places you legitimately can't fly a ball to, or definitely can't get a ball to land. But what we're going to do is we're going to see how these big hitters, these Bryson DeChambeaus, these Brooks Koepkas, play my golf course. And then I'm going to go out there on Monday and I'm going to put new bunkers right where they try to land the ball. And I just loved the idea of like the PGA, the golf purists are coming out of the woodworks now, the architecture guys, the golf course designers, because these guys are hitting the ball too far. And it's not that it'd be one thing if you hit it 360 down the middle, but these guys are now turning their hips and taking it over the trees and just cutting out half of the golf hole. And that's just not at all the way these guys design these golf courses. And it's not the way the game was historically played, with wooden clubs and balls that, spun too much and those kind of things. But I just thought it was hilarious that a guy like Jack Nicklaus, the greatest golfer of all time, Tiger Woods says himself. So that's the only reason I say, because, obviously Tiger's 1B there. But he says, you know what? Okay, boys, you want a challenge? Here's a challenge. And then next week, I'm going to rip it all up. And the funniest moment of the entire golf tournament yesterday, John Rahm has an 8-shot lead at the turn and starts to tumble, and that's a different conversation. But they show the first green. They're already ripping up the first green. The golf tournament's not over, and they're already ripping it up. They've closed the golf tournament for the next couple of weeks. They're going to redo the golf course. And I just thought it was kind of like a proverbial middle finger to these guys that are, just driving the ball and shooting 18 under every week because, these purists want the game back. And, I love it. I love the U.S. Open. I love, the Open across the pond because it's so much fun to watch because these guys struggle and they look like normal golfers and the conditions are just unreal. And it was good to see that back at Muirfield this week. I don't think Jack expected the final score to still be where it was, but it was good to see some guys kind of have some reality checks, especially yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, just to jump in this real quick, but I saw somebody put on social media that years ago they had to Tiger-proof a course, and now they're going to have to Bryson-proof a course because he's just saying, hold my protein shake. I'm going to hit it 800 yards. You know what I mean? He's just like, I'm going to hit it 800 yards and just, do whatever I want to do. So it didn't work this week. He did not look he didn't look particularly good on one hole, but that is what it is.
I think we should get into that. And I think I don't like Bryson. I'll be real upfront about that.
I'm with you. I'll hold the flag on that too.
Because Bryson's not okay. So he's trying to be Tiger. I'll just say that. Tiger in his heyday was not a nice man on the golf course. Some would say he wasn't a nice man off the golf course. That's a different conversation for a different day. But he wasn't a nice man. He wasn't nice to fans. He wasn't nice to his caddy. He wasn't nice to the guys he played with. He just wasn't. He was in the zone. He was the guy to be. He was on a different level. He was king, and that's just what it is. He was the original Tiger King, obviously. But here's what Bryson's doing. Bryson has changed the game. Bryson has club speed, ball speed, strength, anything you want. He's got playing a 6.5-degree driver. He's playing irons that are all the same length. He has completely changed the game. But the issue is he can't take it the other direction. So here we go on Friday at the Memorial. He's on hole number 16. He's one under. He is going to make the cut. He comes out, he pulls driver OB on the par 5. He pulls a 3-wood. He pulls a driver on the par 5, OB. Then he argues with a rules official over the placement of his ball next to a fence and the fact that he cannot play it, even though it's easily out of bounds. He gets over that. I don't think he got over it, but he tried to get over it by pulling 3-wood out of the trees, OB. Then he says, I'm Bryson, hits another 3-wood, OB. And then he says, wait a minute, let's do it one more time. 10 cup here. Let's do it 3 times in a row. And he gets it in bounds by about a yard. And he ends up making 10. But here's the real issue I don't have a problem with Bryson getting the camera time, getting the media. But what happened is, for the second time in the past few weeks, Bryson had a blow up hole. He got all up in his own head, and he had his caddy stand in front of the cameraman because Bryson can't be shown when he's not playing well. That's ridiculous. Like, you don't get to try to be Tiger if you can't be Tiger. Now, Tiger took his lumps eventually, and he took his lumps real hard, and the break you were talking about, the break, which wasn't really a break. But he took his lumps, and I think he had to get over it, and I think it took a long process for him to get back to the mental state he needed to be, which was probably a new place in general. But, I mean, I'm not here for the I can pout and I can cry, but you're not going to see it thing. Like, I want to see you play well when you play well, but I don't, we're going to see you play either way. And it was just being a baby. I didn't like it.
It's just frustrating because you teach so many young athletes that you just got to move on. You just got to, you got to keep positive attitude and move on. And then you got professionals acting like babies is what I'll say. He was being a baby. And so it's just frustrating for young athletes to see that and think that it's okay to act that way. And so we do not endorse that on this show. We do not endorse the actions of Bryson DeChambeau on his 10 because I hit 10 all the time and I don't act like that. So, we just gotta move on with it. So
I mean, and I'll sneak it in there. I'll tee it up for you, Justin. But I mean, John Rahm the same way. John Rahm has an 8-shot lead. He pulls a driver OB on 11 and he whacks his driver on the ground. We don't need that, John. You're going to win the golf tournament. You're only the second Spaniard all time to be number 1 in the world. Just put your club in the bag, breathe a little bit, and keep playing. Yep. What about you, Justin? What's your go to the week?
NBA bubble, man. It has given us some great content. They're setting up the barbershop. Players are saying it's like they're in 2K, right? Somebody put, am I going to have to use VC to go get a haircut kind of thing? Just the great stuff that we're seeing. We're getting some front row access stuff to practice, entertaining stuff. Like the Lakers put a picture of Jason Kidd and one of those role players cutting up at practice. Just stuff you don't ever see. And then my question that I'm gonna want to see is LeBron has been such a big vocal point on Twitter during this time and all that stuff, and we're getting front row access to these guys because they're in the bubble. Is he going to go dark 23 mode? Is he going to do that when playoffs hit and he's still in the bubble? I'll be shocked if he doesn't, but I mean that's just stuff you're going to wait to see. And the fact that the NBA just is really good at getting you to care about their players, not just their product. They get you to care about their players. And so the NBA is really good at doing that. Baseball isn't good at it. The NFL isn't really that particularly good at that. Those guys have to do it by themselves. But the NBA is just really good at getting you to care about their guys and then what they do on the court second. And I think that's a good thing. And so I'm giving it to the NBA and the bubble and that idea. Now all the stuff about the snitch hotline and all that kind of stuff, that's stuff for another discussion, but just the idea of the bubble and what the NBA is doing, I'm a fan of, and I think that's the go to the week. So, Nick, we'll jump back. We'll do the roast of the week here, and so give me your roast of the week.
I mean, we've been a little PGA heavy. Spoiler alert for what's coming at you, but I mean, going back to John Rahm, John Rahm hits the chip of an absolute lifetime on the par 3 16th. And he moves the ball before he hits it, and he doesn't realize it, and we watch it in slow-mo, and he has a 5-shot lead, so it's not going to matter. And then, it gets kind of tight there for a minute as far as the announcers are concerned because they think, well, here comes Ryan Palmer. Shout out to Ryan Palmer for fixing his swing in a week, but – the rule book's dumb. The PGA rule book is dumb. There should be 5 rules of golf. You can't tee it up again. You can't hit it when it's out of bounds. You can't argue with the cameraman. There you go. You got 3 of 5 right there. I gave them to you. But it's just why do we say it has to happen in live action? So, for example, if John doesn't see it, then it shouldn't have counted. If his playing partner didn't see it, then we shouldn't take a 2-stroke penalty. But the only reason we saw it is because John Rahm was playing in the final group. So we were watching John Rahm. We watched replays of John Rahm, and then they're like, oh, look, the ball moved. I mean, if think of a guy Jordan. Jordan wasn't in a featured group yesterday. If Jordan had done the same thing, you wouldn't have seen it. We wouldn't have known. But why does it matter when John does? It's so stupid. And I, CBS kind of popped up on him there at the end, and we're like, hey, did you know that you're about to find out that you got a 2-stroke penalty? And he was like, I don't know. It didn't affect the golf tournament. It made it so that the winning score wasn't in the double digits, which I think probably the Golden Bear thought was kind of funny. And shout out to those of you that did get in on the betting action. Been paying a little bit more attention to this recently. But if you bet Ryan Palmer in a normal format to play better than John Rahm, just stroke play, he did based on that two-stroke penalty. So guys cashed out on that. So that was really terrible. But overall, the PGA rulebook got to go. And the way that we're showing golf coverage, you legitimately have the market right now, but I can't watch golf until the last 4 hours of the golf round each day. And if I want to watch Tiger or I want to watch anybody who's in a featured group, I have to pay for that. Like, this is ridiculous. Oh, and then shout out to our free coverage on Twitter, which didn't work either day this week. I mean, it's just like, I don't understand the PGA right now. You have the market. Tiger was playing this week. Bryson's been blowing the cover off the ball, and we can't even watch it. I mean, last week they had a playoff that was not on live television. They legitimately had the guys on CBSSports.com in their HQ studio live calling it from the stream. Like, that's just ridiculous. Like, if you want us to enjoy your sport, which we do, show it to us. I just don't understand. The PGA is fooling around. Other sports are coming back, and the PGA will be back in the back seat where, in a lot of people's minds, it belongs. What about you, Justin?
Yeah, and just jumping in that, even the PGA Live cameras look like they're shot by an amateur, high school student. Like, can you not get us some better cameras? I can't even stand to watch it because it's so bad. And so, like, if you want your game to be taken seriously, then you have to take it seriously, and they're not. So, my roast of the week is Tyler Malley. Like, dude, you're really gonna. Your catcher told you, okay, if you don't know, I'll jump into it here in a second. He pegs Castellanos in the back. Castellanos hasn't been able to play the last 2 games of the series because he's getting pegged in the back by his own team. Not on purpose, but I'm watching MLB tonight. They're getting ready to jump the Reds coverage. They jump to Reds coverage just as Castellanos is getting pegged in the back, and I'm like sitting there like, classic Reds. Like, they're getting ready to praise the Reds, and we're sitting here pegging our own dudes. Like, Tyler, if he tells you to throw an inside fastball and you don't want to throw it against your teammate, miss the spot. It's a scrimmage. Like, just miss the spot. It's not that big of a deal. Throw an outside fastball and get a ball. Like, come on, dude. Don't second guess and like try to shot put an inside fastball. Let's just, put it in the dirt. It's classic Reds. That's what we were talking about earlier. We try to get our hopes up for the Reds, and they're probably gonna let us down, just like Tyler did when MLB Network shot to Reds coverage and we hit our own teammate in the back. So that's my roast of the week. So our last thing, our challenge of the week, Nick, you can jump in here when I'm done here for a second, but wear your mask. All right, wear a mask, put them on, even if you don't agree. Just do it, and we all want to get back to normal life. And the way we get back to normal life is we put on a mask. And we respect what people say to us who are in places of power that we have put there, and we respect that. That's just what we do. That's what adults do. So how about we do what adults do and just do something that's going to protect other people and what our leaders have told us, even if we don't agree, it's what we should do. So put on a mask.
Yeah, I think absolutely everything you just said. When your grandfather tells you something to do, you do it. Grandpa Mike DeWine the other night got on. He told you in prime time, wear your mask, and he gave some serious hints about going back to school normally and playing sports. It's really that simple. He told you what to do. Wear a mask. He, in some people's eyes, he was pump faking what's coming next. But at the end of the day, I don't know what it's going to take for some people, but just wear a mask. Respect authority, like Justin said, and honestly, just have some respect for some other people. And, maybe we're wrong. If we do that, then maybe these sports will last, and maybe we will actually see a World Series title for the Cincinnati Reds.
Yep. It was fun. We've been away too long. Join us back next time on The Bricks.